Hey guys, welcome back to the Better Not Bitter podcast. I am your host, Maya Warren, and I'm so glad that I can have you with me today. Today, we're going to have a special guest, but before we get into that and I introduce him, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're a moderator, please let me know how my audio is down below. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you today's special guest, Dale Hamilton of the Life with Albinism Podcast.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, fam. First, I want to say thank you for joining me today. It's an honor to always meet another individual with albinism doing what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm glad that you even sent the invite. I'm glad that you invited me here.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so as you stated, my name is Dale. I do currently have my own YouTube channel as well called Life with Albinism. I'm actually even wearing our signature t-shirt. So for anyone who is interested, you can follow me at Life with Albinism. That's on all platforms. Instagram, life_with_albinism. YouTube, Life with Albinism Podcast. You can check out our shirts that we have available for sale, only $20 each, Life with Albinism t-shirts. And just me as a person, growing up with albinism, I always realized that we are a very small community, and we definitely have to stick together and just push each other forward. And that's always what I've been about. I've always loved having albinism. I've always loved, being different. And it's something that I see that needs to be pushed more into the media.
That's awesome. I think that's a great thing. I came across your content maybe about a year ago during the pandemic.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And I noticed, I was like, hey, this guy, he's married, he has kids, he's established a podcast, he's literally doing a lot of great things. And I think it's important that we as a community see that. That's something I wish I would have had growing up. So tell me a little bit about your experience growing up with albinism and how you came to accept your condition.
Okay, so growing up with it, luckily I had a mother who really didn't play any games, So when it came to like defending me out in public and things like that, she always did that. And she always taught me, like, there's nothing different about you. Yes, you have albinism. Yes, your skin is a little lighter, but you're just like us. You're African American, So she always taught me, like, not to feel any kind of way about my condition. Thus, I never did. So I never was that kid who like looked at himself in the mirror and said, "Oh wow, I'm so different," or "Why aren't I like other people?" I honestly always came to terms and always accepted the fact that I had albinism, even from the very beginning. But growing up with it was hard at times because you do get bullied a lot. Well, I can't speak for everyone, but let's just talk about me. I was definitely bullied as a kid when I had started going to grade school. I was definitely bullied when I was a kid with albinism. Also, I believe that it got easier once I gotten older, right? So like once you start to go into high school and college, it then becomes a easier way to make friends having albinism, because now everybody wants to talk to you because you're the kid who's different. You know what I mean? And it's just, for me, it's been a wonderful road because it's given me so many benefits. So like going to college for free, again, serving as like a filter to get rid of the kind of friends you don't want, or the kind of friends that only want to be friends with you because you're different. But then in early childhood, of course, the teasing and stuff like that, and then coping with division. That was a big thing growing up with albinism, because I would need glasses, magnifying glasses. I would need special equipment, larger text, things like that. But there was always a resource for those things. So growing up with albinism, it's always been great. Always been great.
That's so awesome. I'm glad to hear that Like myself, you had resources in the area of like
Yeah.
adaptive technology and that your family was supportive. That's one thing that I can say that people like my grandmother, my aunt, my brother, they've always treated me as if there was nothing wrong, and they've appreciated my albinism and they've helped me accept it myself. Something my aunt always says is she's like, remember when you're out in public, you're a celebrity, so smile. And I went through my fair share of bullying and learning to accept it because I was the only person that I saw for a while. But eventually, like you said, it got better. So along those same lines, I like to ask you about when you were in the college age years. What was that like for you compared to being in K through 12?
Okay. So on to college. That's when it really became kind of weird because that's when I started noticing that people would want to be your friend just
Mm-hmm.
because you were different and not because
Mm-hmm.
they saw something unique about you. It just all became about, oh, look at the little albino kid. I want to be friends with him. That's how it was in college. So it was a lot of that. Then of course the bullying was somewhat there, but not really much in college.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I also think that the good thing is that by then you could have more of an advanced level of note taking for your classes if you couldn't read the board. So
Yeah.
I remember being in college and they would actually pay someone to sit in the classroom with me and take down the notes for me. As opposed to when you're in like grade school, they just give you this big book that's like this tall,
Yep, I
with
remember
one
that
print.
book.
You know what I mean? So in college, it was a lot. The help that you get was a lot more advanced. One thing I want to say, people probably already know this, but I want to put it out there anyway. If you have albinism, you can go to college for free. Okay. If you have albinism, you should not, under no circumstance, pay for college. It is absolutely free. That was one thing that helped me a lot. And like I said, the friend making process was a little weird because people wanted to be your friend just because you were different. Um, and then other than that, that's when albinism started to affect the dating a bit. Where for me, some women would look at me as being too different to want to date. You know what I mean? I started noticing that in college, and I guess you notice that more in college because that's when you start to date a lot more. You start to talk to people a lot more. Not only that, but then you're around so many people. So the social dynamic of having albinism in college kicks into gear really fast.
That's dope. I'm glad you shared that. I'm interested to know what your degree was, what you got your degree in.
Bachelor's in psychology.
Oh, that's awesome. What inspired you to get that degree?
Oh, so for me, when I was a little kid, I loved to talk to people. I'm the kind of
Hmm.
guy that can talk to someone on the phone for hours and hours and hours. And I've always been like that since I was a little kid. So as I started talking to people for so long and for so many hours, I then started to realize, hey, I'm pretty good at giving people advice now. I'm pretty good at understanding people now because I've spent so much time talking to so many people on the phone for so long. So I just developed this niche to want to help people and want to talk to people and want to talk people through their problems. So then, boom, I just fell right into the line with psychology and never switched. Even since I graduated in 2012,
Hmm.
I never, ever, ever had any job outside of the realm of psychology. I've always stayed in the psychology career field.
Wow, that is dope because a lot of times, especially with my generation, when we graduate, we end up getting jobs outside of our career field before we even get a job in our career field. So that's
Yeah,
really cool to hear.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, this is a bit of a selfish question. I am
Yeah, ask
in
me whatever you want. I'm an open book.
awesome. So I'm in that after graduating college phase. And as a person with albinism, having low vision, what are some tips that you have for people in my shoes and for me in that process of post graduation?
In terms of finding a job or in terms of what?
Finding a job.
Okay. So this might be a question that's not necessarily pertaining only to the people with albinism, but an advice that can help anybody post graduation. Thing number one, be relentless with your job applications. When you graduate with your degree, apply for job after job. I think in the heat of the moment, I would apply to 10 jobs a day, at
Wow.
least 10 jobs a day, every single day. And if you do make a network or a contact with somebody, keep in contact with them. There were times where I would interview for a job, they would not select me, but I would have the email of the hiring manager and I would reply to him every so often and say, hey, do you have any openings now? If not, I'd contact them back a month later. Hey, do you have any openings now? So be very, very relentless in your application process. Keep applying to job after job. Another thing is, do not be afraid to apply to jobs that may look like they're above your level. There are times where I've applied for jobs that said master's degree, and I only have my bachelor's in psychology. I've applied to jobs that said they wanted a master's degree and got offered that position. So continue to apply to jobs relentlessly. Don't be afraid to apply to jobs that you may think are above your level, and keep constant communication with the people that you do make communications with. And don't be afraid to take that entry-level position just to have that resume builder. Because a lot of times you might see a position where it's like, it's in my field, but I don't really want to do it. Forget that. Apply for that, take that job. Even if it's a job you really don't want to do, as long as it's in your field, take it, use it as a resume builder, use it as a stepping stone, and work your way up. You will not have any problems if you follow those steps.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I appreciate you sharing that advice. Anything to learn and grow and move on up.
Absolutely.
Is
Absolutely.
So appropriate. So I noticed that on your page that you are a man of faith, a man of God, and that your faith in God is constantly at the forefront of the content you create. Tell me a little about your relationship with God and how that has helped you in your journey of having albinism.
Okay. So I was born Christian. I was raised in a Christian household. My mother would go to church on Sundays. My mother would read the Bible. She was very, very, very into the Christian faith, always reading the Bible, always praying with us, teaching us how to pray. So I've kept that rhythm even into my adulthood. Even going to college, I remember praying over my college room and things like that. Like, I would always pray before I go anywhere. I try to pray at least 3 times a day. And for me, it really feels good. It's like it feels like a great sense of security. And I can honestly tell you, I've achieved everything in life that I've ever prayed for. And I'm being serious. There's jobs I've prayed that I would get, and I've gotten them. There's salaries that I've prayed to reach, and I've reached past them. There's other things I've prayed for, like a wife and kid, or things like that, or to have the right situation too, because anybody can get a wife and kid. You can marry anybody off the street, but to be happy in a relationship and find the right one, all of that has happened to me. I've prayed to God to bless me in all different types of ways, and it's always happened. And I genuinely believe that it's because I keep my faith. I continue to pray. I try to read my Bible as often as I can, and having that faith has always pushed me forward. In terms of albinism, like I said, I've always been in acceptance of my albinism, so there was never like, it was never like a situation where I needed to where I wanted to pray to God to help me cope with that. But I'm pretty sure if that was one of the things that I needed to pray about, it would have happened. And I've honestly felt like I've received every blessing I've ever asked for from God, and even more, even beyond those things, like traveling the world at such a young age and seeing the vast majority of the planet. It's mind blowing to me, and it's all due to the grace of God that I'm in a position to do so well.
Amen. That's awesome. And that's dope. And you were preaching, okay? One of my catchphrases is you better preach. And you were preaching, sir. All right. So you mentioned that you got to travel the world at a young age.
Absolutely.
Describe how that opportunity came about and what it was like.
I love these questions. I really love these questions. Um, so this is how it came about. I had an uncle who obviously is much older than me because he's my uncle. And when I was a young kid, like about 12 years old, I would go over his house to listen to rap music and stuff like that. And at the end of every day, he would always pull out these photo albums. This was back before camera phones existed. He would have these photo albums that he would show me, and he would be like, "Look, I went to Morocco this day. Look how beautiful the scenery is. Look how beautiful the beaches are. Oh, look, I went to Thailand. Look how beautiful the scenery is. Look how beautiful the people is. Look how great the food looks." And he would show me these pictures from all these different countries that he's traveled to. So that right there registered into my brain at like 12 years old. I have to travel the world. I have to do it. So the moment I got my career in psychology, my first career was being a caseworker for foster care. So I was pretty much a social worker. At that time, I was making pretty good money. And that's when I first started traveling. And I did my first trip ever in 2014, and it was to India. And I literally just picked it out of a hat one day. I literally woke up one day. I said, okay, I want to start traveling now. I've been saying I wanted to do this since 12. I have the money now because I have the career. And I literally woke up one day. I went on bookit.com. They don't exist anymore, but I went on bookit.com and I said, okay, I'm going to pick a random place. And I picked New Delhi, India. And I went there for 5 days. And ever since then, I was hooked on traveling. After that, I went to Thailand, then I went to Egypt, then I went to Brazil, then I went to the Caribbean, then I went to London. I went to all of these places, and I just went crazy. I literally went crazy. You know what I mean? So
that's awesome.
Absolutely, I would say my favorite place to travel was Thailand so far. And I was 25 years old in Thailand for 2 weeks. I went out there for 2 weeks, and I had the best time of my life, from the sightseeing to the tourist activities to the shopping. Everything was so beautiful. Everything was so wonderful. I absolutely love traveling. And just to answer the other part of your question of like how it came, about how I had the opportunity to do it, is just by having the career at the time and not having so many responsibilities. Obviously, this is way before the wife and kid. So financially having all of that money, I was like, yo, let's go. Let's do it. And awesome. It's the best feeling in the world to travel.
That's something that I aspire to do. Something me and my family always talk about is like, hey, we want to go here. We want to do this. One of the places that I aspire to go, obviously New York, places like Colorado, LA, but I really want to
go. What about real traveling though? Because that's not real traveling.
Yeah, no? I want to go. The place that I want to go to the most is Italy. I want to go to Italy. I want to eat the cuisine. I want to take in the scenery. I watch a lot of YouTube videos of people who have gone there. I also go fishing. So anytime I think of traveling, like I gotta go fishing wherever I end up traveling to.
So have you gotten your career yet?
I have not. I'm currently in the process of filing applications and working on things. So I have applications out there. I'm just waiting. And in the meantime, while I'm waiting, I'm doing what I'm called to do. My degree is in kinesiology, which is sports medicine / physical therapy, biomechanics, the study of the human body. I originally wanted to take that degree and go into graduate school, but recently there have been some things that have occurred that now I have to take a detour. But I'm learning that through just taking advantage of things like social media and YouTube and building relationships with people, that those dreams are still attainable and possible through different avenues than I expected.
So I asked you those questions to say this. When you do land your career, start traveling right away. Do not wait. Don't wait on nobody. Ideally, you do want to travel with someone, but if you get to that point where you're like, hey guys, let's go to Italy, and then all of your friends are like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. Leave them behind. If you got to go alone, do it. But I say all of that to say this: when you get that career and you start making some decent money, make sure you start traveling right away. And it's not as expensive as you may think. So off the record, just so we don't go off on a on another tangent, off the record, I am a travel expert. If you ever want to know how to travel anywhere around the world for the best prices and the best perks, or even want to get to the point where you start traveling for free, you let me
Oh,
know.
wow.
I can teach you how to do all of that, because I have all different kind of travel programs, travel credit cards, and stuff like that. So I haven't even paid for a flight in like over 2 years. But
Wow.
that's for another topic.
We're gonna have you on the show.
I'll put you up on.
We're gonna have you on for another episode to talk about that.
No, for sure.
So I have another question, and
Absolutely.
this is kind of related, but it kind of ties in the low vision aspect or your vision. I don't know if you have low vision. Not everybody with albinism does, but how have you navigated having vision impairment or low vision as an adult when it comes to traveling and workplace abilities and things of that nature?
Very good question. Absolutely. Even to this day, there are times where I get on the bus or I get on the train in familiar areas and I can't quite read the signs to know what stop we're at, what road we're at. It's very hard for me to read road signs from a distance. So sometimes it's very hard for me to know where I'm at. So the best advice I can give is always look for a landmark. So let's just say if you plan to go to, let's say 125th Street, right? But you can't read the sign that says 125th Street, look for a certain landmark. So you could say, okay, there's an IHOP on 125th Street. So as soon as I see the IHOP, that's when I know it's my stop. So yes, daily I do struggle when traveling to see the different signs or to see where I'm at. And then also, I would even say that sometimes, your vision really gets in the way whenever you want to do other things. Like there's sometimes, like, just even, let's say I go to the gym and I have my glasses on and I'm sweating too much and my glasses are sliding and stuff like that. So any place that you go, it could definitely interfere with your ability to travel and your vision being low.
Yeah, that makes sense. I experienced similar things as well, like for the longest, and I still do it. But I use a device called a monocular. So when it comes to like crossing the street or ordering food, I would use that. Now I kind of just Google like before.
Oh, that's another one. That's another. I hate to cut you off. But you mentioned food. That's a very important one. Every time I go into a restaurant, it's hard for me to read the board that tells the menu that's above the screen that tells you everything that they have and the prices. So what I would usually do is I would ask the person behind the counter, like, hey, can you tell me how much this meal is? Or can you tell me what comes on this sandwich? And then, of course, because they don't know that you're visually impaired, they say, sir, it's right there. And then I'm just like, obviously it's right there. If I could read it, I wouldn't be asking you. You know what I mean? So what I do, the trick that I do is I always pull out my phone and then I put it in camera mode and then I zoom in to be able to read the menu. So that's a good trick. Another thing I forgot to answer is when you asked how does it interrupt work. So I will say this: all the jobs that I've ever had, I've had situations in which it was hard for me to see like the computer screen at work. So I would normally sit very, very close to my laptop at work. And then you're going to get some issues with that, right? Because somebody's going to walk by your desk or your office and say, why are you sitting so close to the screen? Why are you so close to your laptop? And then you have to go and explain to them like, hey, listen, I have low vision. This is my comfort zone of sitting. So yes, my vision also impacts my work ability because I have to now sit much closer to my laptop. And sometimes when I get paperwork with very, very small print, I'll ask for larger print, things like that. So yes, it will interrupt with work as well. So please be prepared for that.
Yeah. Something that I find with my friends and sometimes family members and people who don't know me, but they see me like holding my phone this close.
Yeah.
People ask like, how in the world do you see? You say you have low vision. What does that mean? How do you see? And I break it down, one, it's the grace of God, because the way that he put our bodies together as humans, he created us in such a way that if you have a disability, something like a vision impairment, your brain doesn't even recognize it after a while because you've adapted to it and you've learned to use certain tips and tricks. Like when I'm at a restaurant, before I even get there, I've Googled the menu. If I get there, and if I get there and I can't see it, I ask a friend or like the cashier. Another thing that I do when it comes to like traveling, or like at my university, we would have a transit bus that would go around campus because it was kind of big. I would talk to the driver like, hey, this is my first time. Could you let me know when you get to such and such a stop? And through doing that, yeah, and it forces you to be not only a good self-advocate, but it forces you to learn routes the best way you can. And I've been in situations where I've told the pizza guy how to get where, get to me because I've mapped it out and I've done it so many times. Could you talk about how having albinism has helped you become a self-advocate?
So for me, with having albinism, I've learned that there are times where you're going to have to advocate for yourself, right? So kind of like you stated, there are going to be times where you'll tell someone, hey, I can't read this. Can you read this for me? Or same thing you mentioned with the bus example. I've did that all the time. I'll get on the bus and I'll say, hey, my stop is 125th Street. Can you let me know when we get there? And then the bus driver will actually announce over the speaker, hey, we're approaching 125th Street, So it definitely almost forces you to have to advocate for yourself because you're going to be in circumstances where you can't do something alone, whether it be your vision or whatever the case, and you have to ask somebody else to do this for you, rather it be asking for somebody for a ride because you can't drive a car, or asking someone to read something because your vision isn't good enough, or even things related with your skin, being that we have melanin in our skin and we might get burnt when we go outside. There are times where I might ask somebody to go get something for me from the store or something like that because I know it's just way too hot. So I'll even give you one in terms of parenting. There's so many times where we want to take our daughter to the park, but it's 91 degrees outside. So I'll ask my wife, like, hey, babe, can you take Jade to the park because it's really hot, and I'm going to burn. So having albinism, it's definitely going to force you to be a self-advocate if you're not already. And there's nothing wrong with that. The biggest thing I'll say is do not be afraid to ask for help anytime that you need it.
That was a word, sir. That was a word. I hope y'all are paying attention to these golden nuggets, because this is what community is all about, sharing what you've learned. Something that has helped me from watching content like yours and Jennifer Renee's and No Melanin is the fact that you guys are essentially where I want to be in terms of advocacy and getting to a level where you're reaching more people and building relationships. Tell me how starting your podcast came about.
Okay. So with having albinism, I realized there's not much content for people with albinism out there. So the first thing I did before I even started my podcast, I went on YouTube, I went on Netflix, I went on Google, and I typed in the word albinism on all these platforms and just saw what do they have. I noticed they didn't have any podcasts at the time. They had very few documentaries, and when they did have documentaries, it was typically about the albinos who get killed in Tanzania. There wasn't much about just the typical Black person or white person with albinism living in the United States. It wasn't a lot about that. A lot of it was about those who live in Africa. A lot of it was about the killings in Tanzania. And a lot of also the stuff that I would find of, your typical person with albinism, like let's say the Blacks, the whites, or who live in America, a lot of it was short very, very short documentaries where it would just be a person with albinism explaining what albinism is. But I didn't find many open platforms in which it would be like, let's say, like a podcast or like a full length documentary, something more than 10 minutes where it's just like they have no melanin in their skin, they have vision problems, and they burn, and that's it. It's like, no, I want something that documents the everyday step in the life of somebody with albinism. So that's what made me come about with my company, Life with Albinism. So that was the first thing I did. I noticed there was no podcast or nothing like that. So I said, okay, I have a cousin with albinism. I also have a best friend named Jason with albinism. Why don't I call these two individuals and the three of us could sit down together and make a podcast on YouTube called Life with Albinism? So that's how that was birthed. And once I did that, I wanted to take it serious. So I got a logo done. I got the name of it that came about, which was Life with Albinism, or LWA for short. I started getting business cards done. And now, anytime that I meet another person with albinism, the first thing I do is I run up to them and I give them my business card and I say, hey, my name is Dale. I have this podcast called Life with Albinism. It's the first albinism podcast on YouTube. You guys can follow my channel. You can watch my episodes. Would you like to be on the show? And 9 times out of 10, they say, yo, man, that's dope. I would love to be on your show. I give them my card. I exchange numbers with them. And then later on, I call them and I say, hey, come on to my show at this day, this time. And ever since then, I've been networking with so many people with albinism. And now it's like every time I step outside, I meet somebody with albinism now, you know? So that's how the podcast came about and how I've continued to network with other people with albinism.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I remember coming across your content like, man, this is something I haven't seen that much. Like, because even when I was about to start my podcast, if you don't know, the origin of my podcast is based upon me having chronic migraine disease, ocular cutaneous albinism, and, chronic fatigue. So I couldn't find anybody who was doing disability awareness and talking about all of those things and inviting people to share.
Give me just 1 second. My daughter just woke up. Let me go get her. But we can keep it filming though. This is real life stuff right here. This is real life.
It is.
Come here, baby.
Yo, if you're in the chat, go ahead and tell me where you're watching.
You ready to see the cutest girl you ever saw in your life?
Yes. Oh. Look
at her hair all messy. I'm sorry. Come on, baby. You gotta get camera ready. Hold on. You gotta get camera ready, baby. Hold on. Let me get my baby ready. All right, Jay. Come on. You can't. Your hair all messy.
Oh, she's adorable.
Yes, her name is Jade.
How old is she?
She's 2. She just turned 2.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Okay, now I'm sorry. Now, what was your question? We're going to continue the podcast while she's here with us.
All right, sounds good. Mayia love the kids. Mayia love the kids. So my question was, I was stating that, like, even in the origin, the inception of my podcast and YouTube channel, I started out doing music, and then I felt a call to do disability awareness. So even when I was looking for examples, I couldn't find very many examples. And something that inspired me about what you do and different folks with albinism is you guys create your own lane. And so for people in my generation, that's very important because, we get taught that you got to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, when really God has a different plan for everybody, and A, B, C, D, F, G don't work for everybody. Sometimes people start from Z. So I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. And I love the fact that you say that, I love the fact that my podcast was able to inspire you in some way, shape, or form. And I'm glad, because that's what I did it for. I did it to encourage other people with albinism in many different ways, not just in their confidence or in the things that they do, but even just to push the albinism community forward, because it is a small circle. Even if we may see a lot of people with albinism, there's not many of us. And here's the crazy thing. I actually Googled it the other day. there's roughly only about 350,000 people on the planet with albinism. On
Wow.
the planet, less than 500,000 people with albinism on planet Earth. So yeah, man, we gotta keep pushing each other and encouraging each other forward.
Amen. Now, this is the last topic,
Okay.
and I think it's an important topic, being that we're both African American. How has your journey of albinism impacted your understanding of your ethnicity? And for example, like for me, I intentionally made it a point to study my history as a Black American, because through that understanding, it empowered me to also own my ethnicity within having albinism. What has your Blackness, how has that played a part in your life?
I think the biggest part that it played a part in my life in terms of having albinism, and understanding my ethnicity was always having to fight for it, right? Because
Mhm.
every once in a while you come across, hold on, baby, you making the camera shaky. Hold on. Hold on, let me try to get us in focus here. Okay, so I think for me it was you always had to fight for your ethnicity as a person with albinism. What I mean by that is this: is that a lot of times people would question, are you Black? Are you white? Are you, I even hear this a lot, are you Mexican? You know what I mean?
Yes.
People will ask me, are you mixed? Things like that. So how it helped me really bond with my ethnicity and my race and my culture was because I've always had to fight for it. I always came across an ignorant person who just, and I don't mean ignorant as an insult, but ignorant as in lack of knowledge. So an ignorant person who would not know what albinism is and then would question me as to, are you really Black? Are you really this? Are you really that? And I would tell people all the time, like, even if you didn't know what albinism is, and even if you didn't believe me, you could look at my features and tell that I'm Black. Look at this nose. This is a Black man's nose. You know what I mean? Look at this hair texture. This is a Black man's hair texture. Look at this beard. You know what I mean? So it's like, even if you were ignorant and didn't know, you should purely know off my features alone, this is an African American male. So that's how it helped me bond with my race and ethnicity, is always fighting for it and always teaching and showing people, yes, my skin may be pale, my skin may be white, my hair may be white, but I am a Black man.
Amen. I can definitely attest to that, especially having to fight for it.
Yeah.
And through that fighting, it's something about the concept of fighting for something that matters to you. It makes it all the more worthwhile and more solidified in who you are.
Yeah.
And so with that, I ask every guest this question, and it relates back to the title of this podcast. Name a couple things that helped you become better instead of bitter in your journey with albinism and as a person in general.
Not caring what people think. Having albinism, absolutely, positively, from the youngest, earliest age of 0, has taught me, do not care what people think. Don't care what people think about you. Don't care what people think about your appearance. Don't care what people think about just about anything. And that is the biggest thing that albinism has taught me from early on. And that's what helped me become better and not bitter.
Amen. You ended on a word, sir. All right, y'all. This has been episode, I believe, 8 or 9 of the Better Not Bitter podcast. And I want to say a special thank you to Dale Hamilton and his beautiful daughter, Jade, for making an appearance. Tell everyone where they can find you, any website information, any current projects you're working on.
Okay. So you can find me on Facebook at Dale Hamilton. You can find me on Instagram at life_with_albinism. You can also find us on YouTube as Life with Albinism Podcast. In terms of things that I'm doing and promoting, We are working on an albinism documentary, and we want to make it as true to life as possible. We don't want to just focus on the obvious things. Um, my podcast, Life with Albinism Podcast on YouTube, is open to any and all guests with albinism. If you would like to be on my show, send me a DM, send me a message. And last but not least, as mentioned before, we do currently have the Life with Albinism t-shirts available for sale. We have them in medium and in large. They're only $20 each. That includes your shipping. If anybody is interested in purchasing a Life with Albinism t-shirt, you can send me a DM. You can send me an email. Email is also lifewithalbinism3@gmail.com. But please, if you want to get in contact with me, the quickest and easiest way, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And that's all I got.
Thank you again for coming on the show and, spending time with us and teaching us so many dope lessons. And I pray that this particular episode, as all, blesses whoever watches in the replay as well as in the live. And without further ado, guys, we're going to sign off. Remember to live each day to become better and not bitter.
Thank you so much.